Hello book fans! Today I'm going to be reviewing a book by Charity Norman called Remember Me. Now this book is a thriller and it takes an interesting kind of route because what it's about is you have the central character Emily, who has moved from New Zealand to London back in her 20s, and now in her 40s she's thinking about moving back to New Zealand. That's because she gets a phone call from her neighbour saying her dad basically has dementia, so she wants to go back to New Zealand to look after him for a few weeks. So that's how it starts off. That's the first part, and there's a mystery as well to get resolved within this book, and that's the disappearance of her neighbour and kind of chum, Leah Paratha, who disappeared just before she left the country for London. So that is the kind of hook that gets you into this novel, but I think the real cherry on the cake is actually the relationships within this book, and it does take a while for them to build, I would say. For me, I think the first 30 pages I did struggle a little bit. I think it's got a really excellent location in New Zealand. I think that's well thought out. It really brought me back to New Zealand and what that feels like. That's very good, but the characters themselves, they're a little bit it took me a while to get into them, but I think the main thing is that I think what Charity does really well is she sets it up nicely with that mystery. And Leah Paratha, why did she disappear? She basically walked up into a mountain, into the mountains, searching for snails, part of her PhD. Well, no, she had a PhD already. It was her research. So there was many reasons behind that, the potential for her going missing, and that's what we explore, and that's the hook, where you learn little bits of snippets of information. And yeah, the interesting part, as I said, is the family relationships, or didn't say, because I think when you've got a family member with dementia, or who's dead or ill or about to die, money starts to come into her account. So she has, I think Emily's has a brother and sister who've been in New Zealand throughout, and they feel hard done by. They see her as waltzing in, and with who knows what the motive is. Maybe there's a motive of money there, why they've suddenly appeared, and why she creates a bit of friction from that perspective, because her brother and sister are on the same kind of page, and she feels like an outsider because she's been out of the country. So that internal dynamic, the friction in that, is very good, excellent. I really like the way that Charity builds that up, and it's also interesting to see how they are torn apart but also come together at times, and to see what works and what doesn't work in these kinds of relationships. And I think it is reflective of that kind of experience that you would have in real life, which, as an experience goes, it's probably a 1 out of 5 experience. I wouldn't recommend it, but she deals with it very well, and I think it makes for good reading, and a very interesting reading, as well as the background, kind of, well, the foreground, if it's not background, because we're all interested in Leah Paratha. What happened to her when she went up into them there hills? Was she captured by hillbillies or aliens? I don't know. Who knows? But there's all sorts of crazy kind of theories in here. Well, they're not crazy actually, are they? But there's all sorts of angles to keep you thinking as a reader of exactly what happened to her. One thing, I suppose, that if I could criticise the book for a minute, would probably be that it's a little bit focused on with like Emily, the main character, a bit focused on misleading the reader in a way, because it's almost artificially like she's talking to the reader, like to the camera, like I am now, and she's saying what she thinks has happened to her chum, her neighbour, and it's kind of there to mislead you in a way, and some of it is actually useful, and yes, you could guess what actually happened there, and there's all sorts of people that were potentially involved, so there's all sorts of routes to the tragedy. If it is a tragedy, is it a tragedy? I don't know. Well, you can only find out by reading it completely, and I think what she does really well is tie it up in the end very nicely. You won't be disappointed when you get to the end. So what I would say is just don't think about it too much, and that's not just because I didn't really guess the ending. I kind of guessed a lot of it, but not entirely. So just read it and enjoy it. And I think it's really good. It really shows some interesting character development. Once you get past the first like 30 pages or so, because that's another glowing star in this book, because they make for really interesting relationships with each other and how they work together. Even those ones that are only short in the text for a short period, I think they develop really quite nicely compared to the first book. But maybe they weren't as likeable at the start. Maybe that's it for me. So for me, it's probably between a 3.5 and a 4 out of 5 experience. So it's a good read. It's well worth it. I think for the relationship, the interrelationship part of the difficult decisions people have to make with dementia, and how they have to communicate those with family members and how they interact. That is why it's a 4 out of 5. But why it's a 3.5 out of 5 is the thriller part. I think it could have been better implemented. I think there could have been a bit more work done on that side. Maybe it could have filled it out to 350 pages rather than 300 or whatever it is. But overall, it's a good read, and it's recommended if you're into thrillers, people disappearing, especially people who are disappearing in the hills when they're trying to collect giant snails, and with a father that's got dementia as well to deal with. I think for that reason it would be your go-to book, definitely. But yeah, it's worth reading. You won't be disappointed. It's a quick reader as well. I read this remarkably quickly indeed. So very nice, enjoyable. Probably worth a read if that is your bag. So anyway, I hope this has been useful. Drop a like if it has been. Drop a dislike if it was terrible. But give me your thoughts if it's a dislike. Give me your thoughts anyway. Tell me all about it, all about the book. What were your thoughts on it if you have read it, and if it's helped you to buy it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.